episode of Changing Things in the Cafe. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, the podcast that gives you inspiration, insights, and tools to help you run an amazing coffee business. And I'm really excited to have you along today. So thank you for taking time out of your day to join me as we talk about some important topics that will impact your business for the better. Now go ahead and subscribe to Keys to the Shop if you would. That way you'll always be updated with new episodes, and go ahead and share these episodes with friends, with your social media, with your email lists. Let people know that there is an asset, there is a resource like Keys to the Shop with over 700 episodes available for people who want to do great work, serving great coffee, just to help them do that better. And that would be really awesome. Thank you to everybody who's already done that. Also, would be great to have you rate and review the show if you like what Keys to the Shop does. Give us a 5-star rating over on Apple Podcasts. Really helps the show out. Now, Keys to the Shop is not just a podcast, though. It's also a consulting company. That means I work one-on-one with you as a coach and consultant to help you build an amazing coffee business right from the get-go. Or if you're already an operator, working with you one-on-one to help you elevate your operations, your quality, your management and leadership. Lots of people I'm working with right now are just in that refining stage. They're scaling. We're working on solutions to help them just bring the business, like I said, to the next level. And I would really enjoy talking to you about how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help your business. To get on a free discovery call with me, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS at keystotheshop.com. And we'll talk all about what is going on with your business and how Keys to the Shop Consulting can help. Again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, one of the best things about creating a coffee bar is knowing kind of in advance that people are going to enjoy the coffee. You have a lot of faith in the coffee you've sourced, in the training you've done, and of course, the equipment that you have purchased. And one of those pieces of equipment that you can really have some confidence in when it comes to your brewed coffee is the Ground Control Cyclops brewer. This machine is using SCA award-winning technology to extract incredible depths and ranges of flavors from coffees that didn't even think were there. It's like getting to know your coffee all over again. The Ground Control Cyclops brewer is not just a next level amazing batch brewer, but it also has incredible extraction potential, which allows you to make tea, batched espresso for batching iced lattes. You can also make amazing cold brew with the Ground Control. People all over the world are using the Ground Control to discover new ways to surprise and delight their guests and add more revenue to their businesses in the process. So go to groundcontrol.coffee to learn more today. I really love the people at Ground Control and what they're doing for coffee, and I think your business could really benefit if you let them do the same for you. Go ahead and visit them again over at groundcontrol.coffee. Day in and day out, one of the things that we love to do is provide our guests with something that they don't necessarily expect. And that's what specialty coffee is about. You know, the word special is in there for a reason, right? And so when it comes to plant-based beverages, sometimes people feel like they need to compromise. That's not necessarily a great feeling, but when it comes to using the Pacific Barista series for your beverages, that is not part of the conversation. The Barista series from Pacific is the line of plant-based performance beverages that is designed for baristas and tested by world-class baristas before the product even reaches the shelf. So you know it stands up to the heat from steaming, produces amazing silky texture, great for latte art, and on top of all of that, it keeps the balance of the beverage focused on the coffee. So your customers get this total package experience with the Barista series. Check them out over at pacificfoodservice.com. You can get samples and try it for yourself. See what I'm talking about. If you really want to serve your customers the best and surprise and delight them with quality and dependability, you should be using the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everyone. Well, today is another Encore episode. I really love doing these episodes. And, you know, we've done enough of these episodes, you know, Keys to the Shop episodes, that is, that I feel reasonably confident that for a lot of you listening to the show, especially those of you who are just new to the show, that you will benefit from this, because it's hard to go back into the annals of time and back to the very beginning. this is one of those episodes that I think deserves to be refocused on because pretty much all of what we do in the cafe is managing change. Whether that change comes at the hand of an event that's outside of our control or it comes from our own hand. And as I have just returned from Coffee Fest in New York City at the time of recording this, it is right in the top of my mind to talk about change because when people have conversations with me, especially people who are interested in coaching and consulting, the question that's on their mind is really one of, hey, I want to change a couple of things about my business, or I don't even know what I need to change, but I know that there's probably something that needs to change. And that's why this episode I think is really important because it's one thing to say, okay, let's change. I'm inspired. Let's go ahead and jump into a bunch of change and turn a new leaf and all that stuff. But without the proper methodology and approach, all you end up doing is making the problem worse. Worse for you, worse for the staff, and ultimately for the customers. So we end up with a lot of confusion. We end up with a lot of heartache. And then what we say is, never again. I'm not going to go ahead and try to change this or that about my business again, because look what happened. Better to stay with the status quo than to attempt to be aspirational in these areas. And so we're just going to be satisfied. If the customer's not complaining, then I won't complain. I hate to see that. And whenever I'm talking with a client and they're expressing a need to implement something or do something, we always default to the principles that you're going to learn in this episode about the workflow that I think is really beneficial for making the change that you really need to enact actually stick and get buy-in for it and help it actually change your business for the better. So I wanted to bring this to you again, and I'm always open for conversations around these things too. A lot of you already have some experience in taking on shifting things in the cafe and changing things in the cafe and doing things the right way as well as the wrong way. And I would love for you to post in the comments over on Instagram. If you're not following Keys to the Shop on Instagram, I would encourage you to do that. It's just at Keys to the Shop. And when you see this post on a reel for this episode 399, you can share some of your stories about what has been effective for making change actually positive. We're going to talk about the workflow, and really it's a people first workflow. No surprise there if you know the show. We're all about people first systems and doing things that benefit the people that make coffee and coffee retail what it is. So without anything else from me, let's get right to it. Here now is an encore episode it was actually episode 80 from back in the day in early February 2019, Changing Things in the Cafe, a workflow for refinement.
So today we are talking about change. We are talking about how to change things in the cafe. And sometimes that's not as easy as it sounds to do. There are a lot of things that are entangled with the habits and the procedures that we have in the cafe. And I just want to give us a framework for maybe some helpful ways to think about implementing change. So first of all, let's talk about the fact that change is inevitable. Even if you try to fight change, it will happen with or without you. Either it will happen for the better or it'll happen for the worse. And oftentimes in cafes, we see that the change will look like either a slide toward mediocrity over time, and sometimes it's a lot more pronounced where it's just this downward spiral. It's much easier to let those things happen. We have to fight against the natural inclination of an organization to just settle for the status quo. And so change has to be a part of the way we operate our cafes, and it's just a way that we operate in life, really. So most cafes set a thing in play. They make a policy or a procedure, an SOP, a checklist, whatever it is, and they leave it there for years and years and years without refining it. And you could have the perfect standard operating procedures for the way your cafe was when you first opened. You could have the perfect checklist for when you had only $100 hours in your cafe at your busiest. as you increase business, as you grow as a business and take on more employees and maybe change your menu, whatever it is, those things are going to have to change. The way you do business has to change over time. And again, the way most cafes do this, you'll find, if, for instance, with checklists or standard operating procedures, they won't change officially, but they'll be changed unofficially by the baristas who have to do them. So it's not uncommon to see red and black Sharpie markers crossing out sections of a checklist or an SOP that have become irrelevant, but for some reason a manager or owner has not seen fit to actually print a new version 2 of that menu. And so I have a feeling there's a lot of us out there that can identify with these edited by the people manuals or checklists, etc. You'll find a lot of turnover in companies that force baristas and staff to sort of deal with dysfunction without any hope of refinement. This is kind of a problem because it shows that we're not approaching change head first. We're just kind of being dragged along, kicking and screaming into the future rather than embracing it and creating the change before it becomes something that's kind of embarrassing, like, yeah, we should get a new checklist. You hear comments by staff like, why do we do this? I don't know, but it's on the list, so we have to do it. And, or we were never told how to do this, but this is the way we do it, and we've been doing it this way. These are all statements that kind of lead you to believe that there are some changes that need to be made to the way you do things in the cafe. Your gut also tells you whether or not you need to change. There are things that you can see in the cafe that need to be changed, but because you're afraid of the amount of time or energy that it takes to change it, it's just left. And I'll tell you that the compounding effect of sort of putting off needed change in the cafe is far worse in the long run than the pain of actually fixing it in the short term. Again, there's this slow creep toward mediocrity that happens where you wake up one day and the vision of your cafe or your team and the way you wanted things to be is not that way because we weren't actually pursuing the refinement process. So there's two types of change. One is the easy fixes. So that means, for instance, here's an example of an easy fix. You have a par level for how much half and half you order, but now it's cold brew season, and all of a sudden people are putting more cream in their coffee than usual. In your cafe, you know that you need to order more half and half. So the answer is adjust the par, make the par larger, order more, and then communicate with everybody about that and make sure that it's implemented. It's a very easy change, and the reason why this is easy is because it's a small thing and its benefits are seen immediately. And nobody is really going to question increasing the par because it doesn't really force us to learn anything that differently. So let's say it's something other than half and half. If you have to buy a different type of sponge for washing the dishes, or you switch brands of espresso machine backflush detergent, these are little changes that you can make over time. They're really necessary. They're necessary parts of your cafe's evolution, that you're on top of the details, but they're not large-scale changes with multiple steps that you need to really take conscious account of. And that's the next thing. Process change. Things that are more complicated. These are the ones that we're going to address the most in this episode. But when you need to alter course and change things that have been part of the fabric of the way you do things in the cafe for a while, these are things that should be approached by management, leadership, in a very, I would say, systematic way, at least in a way that's conscientious of the impact that decisions have on people who are responsible for actually carrying out these tasks or using the tools or whatever your change happens to be. So let's talk about the steps involved in this type of change. There are 7 steps, and it's not going to take a long time to go through these, but I think every time you look at a process, let's take, for example, changing the way that you make iced beverages on the bar. This is the type of change that needs these steps because you have your whole staff involved in making these drinks. You've got customers involved because they're ordering the drinks. And the business depends on the consistency of the quality of your beverages. So this is going to help you create sort of a checklist for yourself to make sure that you're covering the bases and minimizing the friction of change. There's always going to be friction. There's always going to be maybe a little bit of dissent when something changes because you can't please everybody. But you can certainly eliminate the unnecessary friction by following these steps. So the first thing is you have to observe what's happening in the cafe. You can hear about a change that needs to take place, but unless you see it with your own eyes, and I'm assuming that you're the change maker or one of the people that is going to be somewhat responsible for, implementing the change, you have to observe it with your own eyes. Be present in the mix of the cafe where business is taking place. Never only trust the word that gets back to you from others. Practice that, what we talked about in other episodes, present leadership. Because when you feel the pain, it means it's more likely to inspire action on your part. But if you're distant, if you're hiding in the office, kind of low grade, avoiding the thing that you've created by a matter of your decisions that other people carry out, then you're not going to be inspired to make changes. And in fact, you might resist them yourself. So that's the first thing. You have to go onto the floor and observe what's happening. So if somebody says, on Saturdays, it's really hard for us to work, with 2 people on the bar, we need 3 people. The answer is going there and watching them suffer through it. Take notes and watch them suffer through it. Don't alleviate the suffering yourself by jumping on bar and then sort of putting a Band-Aid on the situation, because that, while noble, and I will say maybe sometimes if it's really bad, maybe necessary. But the point is, by observing it and watching the way it actually is, it forces you to feel the pain of the results of that lack of staffing. And if you feel it full bore without alleviating any of it, sort of ringing the bell and, tapping out, so to speak, then you'll go back to your office with a different perspective, So that's kind of a rabbit trail on the observation part, but it's relevant. I was talking with a couple of friends about this over the weekend in Baltimore, Coffee Fest, how, more change gets implemented when we observe the thing in its natural habitat rather than becoming the change agent that robs us of the motivation to actually make the change. So observe what's going on in the need for change. So number 2 is to listen to people. That means, first, that you have to ask questions. Now, other people might come to you with questions. They might come to you with concerns, and good. I'm glad, because that means that you're approachable. And you've created an environment where people feel comfortable coming to you with suggestions. So that's a win already, because people in leadership roles oftentimes don't get people coming to them with suggestions because they've created, maybe not intentionally, an environment where, because of being insecure with their leadership or whatever it may be, people don't feel comfortable coming to them with feedback because they know that they get defensive. Okay, so when you listen to people talk to you with problems that they have, or you ask them questions, don't critique the feedback. Listen, and listen enthusiastically, in fact, because they're giving you a gift. It doesn't matter what your intentions were behind something that might be critiqued. So if you're the one who invented some process or some drink or bought some tool, the defensiveness will come up because you thought it was a great idea, somebody's not happy about it, and you wanted them to be happy about it, or it costs so much money, or I love that tool, I use it at my house to do dishes. It doesn't matter. If it's not working in the cafe, it's not personal. Don't take it personally. Take it as a sign that something wasn't as effective as it ought to be. It's not a judgment on you. Listen to the feedback. Absorb, the pain of maybe being wrong or maybe being burdened by the necessity to make the change. Listen to the feedback, collect it, and think about it. Don't dismiss it. So that brings us to number 3, and that is creation. So first, we observe. Next, we're listening to problems. We're listening to people as they talk to us about dysfunctional things going on in the cafe. Next, we are going to create a solution. I think it was in Danny Meyer's book, Setting the Table, where a mentor, early mentor of his, who was also a restaurateur, said something to the effect of, Danny, business is problems. And maybe it was his father. It might have been another restaurateur. But either way, business is problems, and there are always problems. If you're a leader, if you're a manager, an owner, solutions are your business. You're assessing first what the problem is. Now, I do want to grant you that there are things people say that aren't necessarily problems that need solving. Sometimes a process is the best that it can be. Can you think about it a little bit more? Sure. Are they heard when you're listening to them? Can you make them feel heard? Absolutely. You don't necessarily have to go through this whole process in order to tell them that it's not going to change. You do have to take their feedback seriously. And I would say that if you're hearing a lot of people talking about the same thing, usually it's a process or a thing that needs to change. So use the information you've gathered to create a solution. In creating your solution, there are some things that you need to take into consideration. First, obviously, you need to take into consideration the people affected by the solution. So when you create a solution to a problem, there are going to be people attached to this this protocol that you're going to implement. What is the peripheral impact of the solution on the people and the cafe? What is the reality of its implementation? So, how long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? Those are some of the limiting factors. So you might have that limitation of time where you don't have the capacity to address it as soon as you possibly could. There's an example of, for instance, somebody wants to change they have a really great way of making the chai, and they introduce the idea toward the end of November or the beginning of December, and holidays are coming around. That's probably a bad time to try to educate all of your staff on making something a better way, especially if people are satisfied with the way they're making it now. It's just too much change in the midst of a time where your minds are distracted, and time is a limiting factor because you have other things to do. It's not a priority. The change also might take a long time. You might have a lot of staff. It's difference between a shop that has 6 people in one store and a shop that has 30 people in 4 stores. So you got to know how long it's going to take, and you have to also know how much money is it going to take. If it's a process that's complicated, you need to be able to know how many hours of practice you're going to have to pay your staff to do if they need lab time to learn that new tamping method. If you need to pay a trainer to stay an extra hour on shift to help people learn a new procedure for pouring. Those are all things that you need to consider, because if you don't, you're going to bite off more than you can chew in time. And with the money part, you're just going to wonder where it all went. So definitely consider those things when you're creating the solution. There are a lot of details that you need to kind of foreshadow how this is going to affect people. How is it going to affect the customer? How is it going to affect your staff, you, the money, the time? How much attention is needed for this thing? And then write down your solution, and so that it's tangible. And that brings us to the next step in the process. Step number 4 is to communicate the solution to the people that you've been talking to about the problem. So when change happens in the cafe, it's a collaborative process, or at least it should be. Let people know that you've created a solution based on what you've seen and heard, and let them react honestly, and then ask for feedback again on the solution. Because sometimes you get it wrong when you try to create a solution. It might be a worse situation than before. You want to be open to getting it wrong, because if you're not, you're just going to replace one dysfunction with another. And if you don't have an immediate solution, now that you're face-to-face with people, let them know, hey, like I said, holidays are on us and we want to solve this problem. Absolutely. We're going to have to defer the process of this particular problem being solved to another month. Maybe in the middle of January, we'll talk about doing this thing. So, if you don't have an immediate solution, you can talk to people about what it could look like down the road to solve this problem when we have more time, when we have more money, because you might not be able to replace a piece of equipment, legitimately can't replace it. Tell people that. Just be vulnerable with them. Don't obfuscate and redirect their attention to something else. Well, this grinder is just fine. Maybe it's not fine. Just say so. Yeah, this grinder sucks. I'm sorry. I would hate to use it. You're right. It's really not a great thing. We want to make it better. Maybe they can think of a way to make it better, but let them know, hey, we want to solve this problem. We can't do it right now. Hopefully, when we get more funds as a cafe, we'll be able to solve that problem. I guarantee you people will be a lot more likely to grumble less and kind of push through that and even be on your side if you're just vulnerable and open with people about it. So communicate that solution to people, communicate what you have decided about this problem. And then step 5 is simply, again, to listen. Listen to what they tell you about the solution, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, what they don't like about it. You might be thinking at this point, why am I, the owner, asking for what I think amounts to permission from the staff to do these things? Well, first of all, it's not necessarily permission. You are actively creating an environment where people's opinions matter in your cafe. And a coffee bar that creates that kind of environment is going to outlast the one where people don't feel like they can talk to their managers or owners. You're not asking for permission. You're asking for feedback. If we're thinking about, worrying about too much of this talk between managers and baristas and too much feedback, then I think there might be an insecurity issue with your authority, where there is some part of you that feels like they should just respect me for who I am because I'm the leader, I'm the manager, and they have to do what I say. And you know what? That's true. They do. They absolutely do. But people don't really respect positional authority. They respect more relational authority. And the currency of relational authority, obviously, is worth more. And you want buy-in when it comes to these things, like changes that need to be made in the cafe. So here you are in the middle of trying to change something. A, it's going to affect people's lives hugely in some cases. And B, you're going to be building rapport for the future and a good relationship between you and the staff. So listen to that feedback that people give you when you present the solution to them. So the 6th step is to implement the plan. You need to plan the step out step by step in course of maybe like a week or 2 weeks to where you can get all of your staff on board and trained. So set a date by which you want to accomplish this, change of procedure, this change of habit in your cafe. Purchase the tools necessary. Make a plan for training everybody that has to be involved with and is impacted by this change. And then put it in writing. Make a schedule and implement that plan of, implementing this change. The worst thing that can happen here is that you take a great idea and you rush it and you go in unprepared and you implement a good idea in a bad way. That's a bad idea. You've turned a good idea into a bad idea. And this is common. This is the most normal way of implementing change in cafes, is to sort of drop it in there. It's like when people are launching new drinks in the cafe, often what happens is ingredients show up and we're like, what are we supposed to do with this? Oh, I don't know, and everyone scrambles. There is a lack of preparedness when it comes to change. And it is not necessary. We can think ahead. And this is not something that I've been free from myself. I've totally done this before in cafes because I'm excited about an idea. But, when I've planned things better, when I've implemented a change with patience and accuracy and forethought, It gives space for the great idea to be seen for what it is, a great idea, a great new drink, a great new way of doing these iced beverages, a better mop to, better style of mopping the floor, whatever it is. You need to have an implementation strategy. So don't rush it. Don't go in unprepared. Think preemptively, plan it out, and don't replace one dysfunction with another. And then finally, number 7, we're going to refine this process. Like we said in the beginning, change is a natural part of the life of a cafe. Who you are 5 years from now, I hope, will be somewhat different from who you are right now. Things will change, and your processes need to change as well. Now, if you've done a really great job in your processes from the beginning, those changes are probably going to be minimal. But oftentimes, demands from customers, change in location, they require you to make large-scale changes to the way you do things, even though the original way was not necessarily bad. Refining your SOPs, refining your checklists, your recipes, your policies, your procedures, the way you do things in the cafe, it's all a part of staying sharp, staying healthy, and communicative between one another and creating a great and healthy cafe. So be open to those small changes and large changes over time. Take these steps and make sure that they are a part of the way that you implement change in your cafe. And if, this sounds like a lot of stuff to do in order to, affect change, just think about this. If you are the one to do the changing, and that's who I'm really gearing this episode towards, then the impact of your actions are much more far-reaching than the impact of the actions of one barista who doesn't have the authority to necessarily change the entire structure of a company or the way people do things. Okay. I know that there are a lot of us out there who are in cafes right now, and you can see that something is not working the way that it should, and you just don't know what to do about it. I will tell you that you have the ability to take on this conversation. And that's what this is. It's a conversation. Solving problems is only really daunting when you think that you have to do it all yourself. And when you have a conversation with people and you make it not so much a prescription of a solution and more a conversation, then you're going to find that not only do the baristas feel empowered to be able to create change in the cafe, but you're going to find that actually empowering people to contribute to the welfare and progress of their company is one of the jobs that management should be tasked with doing and feels great to accomplish. There's a limited amount of benefit that you can get from being the lone problem solver, like our friend Jonathan Raymond talked about in the Life-Changing Power of Good Authority episode. More Yoda, less Superman, less of that whole trying to do it yourself with a cape flying through the sky, and more drawing people out, more conversation, asking questions, making it a building and relational process. That's how change really can take root in the cafe. And I hope that this has helped you feel a bit more empowered yourself to start that conversation and take on whatever that is in your mind right now that you've been putting off. Use that as a test. Take these steps, go out there into the cafe, and take this on as a project and see how these help refine your processes and refine the expression of specialty coffee in your store.
Okay, everybody. Well, what did you think? What resonated in this episode for you? I'm really curious. And, one of the things that I guess I really hope that you walk away with is that whatever you seek to do, whether you went to Coffee Fest and you found some things that really made sense to you and you desperately want to put them into practice, or maybe it's a menu item or a policy, a reconfiguration of leadership, whatever it is, if it's changing things, we have to create in our minds this idea of who is this for and how can we operate with deference to them in a way that's respecting what it takes to actually adopt change, because ostensibly this is why we're doing it. We're doing it for people, right? And so rather than trying to get ourselves just to get motivated through this sense of like, just get it done so I don't forget about it, let's do it messy or don't do it at all kind of mentality. Let's embrace a workflow mentality. Let's create a kind of a pipeline. One thing triggers another, and we keep ourselves accountable to that. And we won't fall prey to the problem that a lot of people who have authority to make changes fall prey to, which is inadvertently creating frustration because there's no order. It turns into chaos, and our best intentions are, frustrated as a result. So I hope that this episode was helpful to you. As I said in the intro here, I would really love to hear anything that you have to share over on Instagram in the comments for this episode 399, and follow Keys to the Shop on Instagram at Keys to the Shop. And tell me, how have you learned to make changes effectively in the cafe? What lessons have you learned in the process? I'd really love to know. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join me for this episode. Now, I mentioned Coffee Fest. I had come from Coffee Fest New York in early March here. So coming up, though, is 3 more shows. There is the show here in Kentucky, in Louisville, where I'm from, coming up shortly in June. And then we've got later on in August, Anaheim, California. And in the fall, we have Orlando, Florida. That's 3 opportunities that you can explore by going to coffeefest.com and registering today for this amazing event. I'm talking about free or accessibly priced trainings, lectures, and workshops that are all designed to help you be equipped for success as a retailer. I gave 5 talks this last time in New York. It'll probably end up being similar for the rest of this year. I would love to see you there. Coffeefest.com is where you can go to register and use the code KEYS, KEYS. Code KEYS gets you 50% off for your team and yourself, whichever show you decide needs to be the one you attend. I really hope to see you there for this wonderful community gathering and equipping event. Coffeefest.com is where to go. I'll see you later this year. And with that, that is the end of today's episode, everybody. I appreciate, again, you taking the time to join me. As always, subscribe to the show, follow the show on Instagram. If you have any questions, email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. And that's also where you can reach me if you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting. Have an amazing day. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.